You're listening to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. I'm your host, Tamara Marie. Before we get started with this episode, I wanted to ask you a question. Why did you start learning Spanish in the first place? I'm pretty sure it's because you wanted to have conversations with real people and not just spend all day on apps or trying to talk to AI or simply learning vocabulary and grammar. So, if you've been struggling to actually speak Spanish and you're not really confident about your ability to talk to native speakers, I wanted to invite you to join our free Spanish Conversation Challenge. You'll practice real conversations that will build your confidence, and you'll learn simple strategies that will help you speak naturally so you sound more like a native speaker and not like an AI robot. So, if you want to improve your confidence speaking Spanish for this new year, I invite you to join the Spanish Conversation Challenge. Now, it is completely free, but spots are limited. So, if you want to make this year the year that you become fluent in Spanish, I encourage you to join us at SpanishConversationChallenge.com. That's SpanishConversationChallenge.com to sign up for our free challenge. Now, we do kick off January 6th. We are going to have daily live sessions. We're going to provide you with guidance so you know exactly what to say, and you won't be intimidated trying to talk to native speakers on your own. So we will guide you through this process. All of our team are very, very friendly. If you're a part of our community, you already know that. If you're not, I encourage you to get this experience so you'll know how it feels to be a part of our community in a real way. So join us, SpanishConversationChallenge.com. Spaces will be limited, so make sure you secure your spot today. We get started on January 6th. Again, SpanishConversationChallenge.com. Now let's get started with the episode. Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation speaking Spanish? Everything was going well until you forgot that one word, that word that you always forget, that no matter how hard you try to study, you come to this point in the conversation that you forget what it is that you want to say. It completely interrupts the flow of the conversation, and you end up wanting to switch back to English. Well, in this episode of the podcast, we're going to be addressing a listener question about this very problem: getting stuck in a conversation because you lack the vocabulary in Spanish to say what you want to say. So if this is something that you have struggled with, make sure you listen to this week's episode because we're going to give you 7 practical tips to keep your conversation flowing and stop forgetting vocabulary in Spanish. Entonces, vamos a empezar. Let's get started.
Bienvenidos.
Bienvenidos.
Welcome to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast,
the show for Spanish learners
that love music,
travel, and culture.
Close your grammar textbooks,
Shut down the language apps, and open your ears
how Spanish is spoken in the real world.
Let us show you
How to go from beginner
to bilingual.
Here's your host,
certified language coach,
Tamara Marie.
Hola y bienvenidos al episodio 219. Welcome to episode 219 of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. In this episode, we're tackling a topic that I know many of you have faced: getting stuck in a conversation because you don't know the words to say what you mean. Now, this can become really frustrating, especially if you're learning Spanish as an adult, because you probably find that you have a much more expansive vocabulary in English or your native language than you do in Spanish. And also that your personality and certain things that you say are really difficult to translate over into Spanish because you really just don't know how to say those things naturally. And you find yourself getting stuck often in conversations. Now, this actually comes from a great question that was shared in our Learn Spanish con Salsa Facebook group by our member, John Covington. So let me read what he wrote. John said, I find that when I want to have a conversation with someone in Spanish, I don't know the vocabulary words that I need to have a complete conversation. It's frustrating because it cuts the flow of the conversation. John, I hear you. This is a common struggle, and I'm sure many of you have also faced this issue, but no worries. We are going to work through this together. By the end of this episode, you will have some clear steps to grow your vocabulary and keep your conversations in Spanish flowing. So I'm going to review 7 practical steps that you can take to improve your vocabulary and also learn how to handle these situations when they come up in a conversation so that you can keep the conversation flowing and that you don't end up having to switch back to English. The first thing is to actively take notes. So let's say you're in a conversation and in the middle of the conversation, you get stuck trying to remember how to say something. Or maybe you just come across something you've never really tried to say in Spanish before. So it's just occurring to you as you're in the conversation. So the first thing I want you to do is to try jotting the word down that you don't know, either in a small notebook that you carry around with you or opening up the Notes app on your phone. And just keep a running list of places where you get stuck in conversation. So even if you can't look this up right away, writing it down will help you remember to go back and learn the word later. So once the conversation is over, that's when you'll go and look up the word, write down its definition, and then create some example sentences. So for example, let's say that you wanted to say to fix, but you didn't know the word. So once you go back and look it up after the conversation, you would find that to fix in Spanish is arreglar, and you would note that down, but you would also include some sentences so you would have some examples in context. So for example, if you wanted to say, I'm going to fix my bike tomorrow, you would say, voy a arreglar mi bicicleta mañana. Voy a arreglar mi bicicleta mañana. It's also good to practice using these phrases in different forms. So maybe you also want to use it in a question format. So for example, you can say, ¿Cómo puedo arreglar esto? ¿Cómo puedo arreglar esto? So how can I fix this? So again, just having these examples in context makes it a lot easier to remember them in the future because you'll kind of have an idea of how the word is used. Also, sort of as a side note, you'll notice that arreglar is a verb and the examples that we have do not have the conjugation. Now, this might be a simple way to remember the verb in its infinitive form because as you start to learn irregular verbs, you might get a little bit overwhelmed with the idea of learning all the conjugation. So just try to keep it simple and stick to keeping one form of the verb. And as you begin to expand and use it more, you can maybe include some of the conjugations. Or also you can make it practical for you. If there's a sentence that you want to say, like if you want to say, I fix my bike, then you would say arreglo. So maybe you want to note that down as well. And then in parentheses after the conjugated verb, put the infinitive form arreglar so that you'll know where it comes from. But either way, noting these things down is a way to make sure that you plug those holes in your vocabulary, and it will turn some of those frustrating moments into real opportunities to learn more Spanish. The second thing is to create flashcards. Now, I know that this might seem a little bit old school, or if you don't like studying in more traditional sense, you might go, I don't want to make flashcards. But the great news is there's so many digital style flashcards, digital versions of flashcards that you can use so that if you're not into the old school index card list and flipping them over and trying to remember things, there are many different apps that you can use so that you can create your own digital flashcards. I highly recommend Quizlet for this. It's an app that I've been using for years. It's really easy to use and you'll be able to access your flashcards on your phone or on your computer. And with Quizlet, you can also include a full sentence with the word. So just like I mentioned before, you want to have some context, and Quizlet will allow you to do that. So you can put maybe the English on the front, or maybe you just do your flashcards only in Spanish. So like, let's say on the front you have arreglar, for example, and then on the back you can have the phrase voy a arreglar mi bicicleta mañana, or voy a arreglar mi computadora más tarde. So I'm going to fix my computer later. So that can be a way, again, to keep that context. And you also, in Quizlet, the thing I really like about it, not only can you include images, which is really helpful if you're a visual learner or you want to stay away from using the English translation. You can put an image on one side, maybe a picture of someone fixing a bike, and on the other side you'll put arreglar with your example sentence. But you can also use audio. So you can either upload your own audio recordings, or you can use Quizlet's audio feature, which is, it's a digitized or computer voice that is saying the word or the sentence in Spanish, but it's really good if the only time that you've seen this word is written and you want to make sure you get your pronunciation correct. I always recommend anytime you're studying vocabulary to do it with the audio, and Quizlet does allow you to do that as well while you're reviewing. And this is great too if you have this in your phone, because you can review your flashcards regularly. Or if you have index cards, you can carry them around in your wallet or your purse or your pocket. And anytime you have a free moment, you can review those flashcards. So maybe you are waiting in the line at the store, or you are sitting in your car while you're in park, not at the red light. Maybe you're waiting to pick someone up, or you are, just kind of taking some time off, some downtime from work. Maybe you're taking a break, and instead of doom scrolling Instagram, or any other social media, or watching TikTok videos for who knows how long, because those things will suck you in, man. You think that you're going to watch one cat video and then a husky comes up, and then before you know it, you have spent your entire lunch break watching TikTok videos. So instead of doing that, you can open up Quizlet or pull out your flashcards, and you can be improving your Spanish vocabulary. You can do this in as little as 5 to 10 minutes a day. So once you have these words noted down, making it really easy to review your flashcards regularly, you'll find that these words will stick to your memory way faster than you think. So make sure that you create some flashcards in a way that works for you. The third thing is that you want to ask for clarification during conversations. So sometimes if you don't know a word that someone says to you, it can really put the conversation or stop the conversation in its tracks, right? Because you just have this blank stare. Someone said something to you. You like, I have no idea what they just said. And you might try to play it off and just, but then when your answer has nothing to do with what they said, it becomes very obvious that you don't know. Or the conversation just keeps going on. And if there's more than one person in the conversation, you start to feel excluded. So you really want to be able to grow some confidence to ask for clarification when you don't understand. And you can use some different phrases to do that. So one that you probably have heard is como se dice eso en español o en inglés. So you can ask, like if someone says, for example, they said arreglar, and you didn't know what that meant, you would say, ¿qué significa arreglar? Or como se dice arreglar en inglés? And they might be able to explain it to you. Now, this works really well if you're talking to someone who's bilingual. But if you are talking to someone who's a native Spanish speaker or has limited English, or if you just want to practice not having to switch back to English, I recommend trying something different. So you can also ask the person to just explain it another way, because it'll be very clear by the puzzled look on your face. Or if you're like me, I wear all my emotions on my face. I have zero poker face. So if I don't understand something, the blank stare is coming. And so instead of just standing there with your mouth open, like, I don't know what just happened, you want to be able to say something, right? So you can say, you can, interrupt the person right while they're speaking, or wait till they finish and then just sort of explain, hey, look, I didn't get that, right? But what you can do is ask the question, ¿puedes explicarlo de otra manera? ¿Puedes explicarlo de otra manera? And that just means, can you explain it another way? You can also ask, ¿qué significa eso? O, ¿qué me dijiste? Like, what does that mean? What did you say to me? But, you can also ask the person to explain it in another way. And I think it'll be clear, like they'll, if someone is trying to help you learn and it's clear that you don't understand, a lot of people are used to just being able to do that. So that will definitely keep the conversation going. And it will also show your conversation partner that you want to learn. So hopefully they'll have some patience with you. This works a lot better when you're talking to a Spanish language coach or a tutor, someone that is helping you learn versus doing this in more casual conversations. But we'll talk about some ways to handle this in conversations with friends and family or while you're out and about. But I would use these clarification questions more in a learning environment. You can also ask them in a conversation as well. But there's some other ways that we can handle that. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so the fourth suggestion that I have is to make sure that you practice your new vocabulary. So once you learned a word, use it as much as possible. So we already talked about writing sentences, but you want to try it out in your next conversation or even just talk to yourself, practice saying these words or your example sentences aloud, or talk to your pet. So a good way to do this is, especially let's say you were talking to someone and it's someone that you speak to regularly, or it's your Spanish language coach or your tutor, and you mentioned something before, you couldn't remember it. It's a great time to follow up during your next conversation. You're explaining like, oh yeah, I had to fix my bike. So you say, recuerdes, remember, que estamos hablando de mi bicicleta. So you can remember that we were talking about my bike. And then you can kind of follow up and start talking about how you fixed it, So that's a great way to begin to use these words in more conversation so that you practice right away. Because the more time that goes between you initially learning it and using it again, you're more likely to forget it. All right. So you want to make sure that you are practicing. So practicing, repeat exposure, finding opportunities to use your new vocabulary is a great idea. Even if it's just that you want to journal and write about what you did for that day, just try to find some creative ways that you can use that new vocabulary and definitely use it in your next conversation. Now, the fifth tip is to stay in the flow. So I know it can seem like forgetting a word is like the worst thing that happens, and it might increase your anxiety, or tu ansiedad. In español, ansiedad is anxiety. But it's really not the end of the world. So think about how many times that you have forgotten a word in English. Maybe you forgot someone's name or what something was called, and you end up saying something like, oh, remember we were at the place, the place, oh, we saw that movie, I can't remember, who was in it, all these types of things we do. But your memory is not supposed to be flawless, is my point, right? We are all human beings. So forgetting a word is not the end of the world, but we do want to find ways to skillfully hint at the fact that we don't know a word or we can't remember a word without breaking the flow of the conversation. And there's some ways that we can do that. So we can use filler words. Like, let's say you're trying to think, you just need to buy yourself some time. You can say, déjame pensar. Déjame pensar. So that's literally let me think. Pensar. Déjame pensar. No lo sé. I don't know. Let me think about it. You can also say something like, lo que pasa es que, and the way I translate that in my head in English is what had happened was, but you're really just saying, you're about to explain something, saying, look, this is what happened. And it's sort of like a way to transition or give yourself time to think of the words that you need. But let's say you genuinely, even after you bought yourself some time, you have no idea. Okay. So you can begin to describe what it is that you're talking about in the words that you know. And I know if you're a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist like me, that it can be really difficult because you know how to say what you want to say in English. You know the way that you want to say it in English, but you just don't know that word or phrase in Spanish. However, you're going to have to get comfortable with explaining it without using the word that you don't know. All right, so let me give you some examples of how this might work. So there are some phrases that we can use as we're doing this. So you can literally just tell someone that you don't know how to say it in Spanish. I mean, that is not the end of the world, because what you'll find is a person will then try to help you find that word, but you're going to have to give them a little bit more than that. You don't just want to stand there and go, I don't know, no lo sé, right? You want to give a little bit more of an effort by explaining what it is that you're trying to talk about. So for example, let's stick with this bike example. So let's say you want to tell someone that you're going to fix your bike tomorrow, but you don't know the word to fix, and you realize that in the middle of the conversation. So you can literally just say, no sé cómo se dice. No sé cómo se dice, which is literally, I don't know how it's said. In English, we would say, I don't know how to say it, but that cómo se dice is that passive voice, how it is said. No sé cómo se dice. You can also say, no sé cómo se dice en español. So I don't know how to say it in Spanish, but this is the key. You don't want to stop there. You want to say, but, okay? So, no sé cómo se dice en español, pero... And then you're going to start to explain it in the words that you know. So in the bike example, let's say I don't know the word arreglar. It occurs to me and I go, yo tengo que, no sé cómo se dice en español. So I'm saying I have to, and I realize that I don't know how to say to fix. So I kind of just pause and go, no sé cómo se dice en español, pero lo que pasa es que yo tengo una bicicleta, so I have a bike, y no funciona. So it doesn't work. So I know how to say funcionar. Okay, my bike doesn't work. Y tengo que hacer algo. So I have to do something. And what you'll find is that usually the person will kind of understand what you're saying. They'll go, tienes que arreglarla. Oh, you have to fix it. Because that's like the natural flow of conversation. Imagine how that would go in English. Like you'd be saying, I have to go get this thing. I can't remember what it's called, but you know how when there's this thing that you use to like tighten up the spokes on the wheel, and they go, oh, you mean like a wrench or a screw or Allen wrench or something like that, like a specific tool. You go, yeah, I need an Allen wrench. No big deal. Happens to you all the time in English. No need to panic. So same thing in Spanish. You just go, look, no sé cómo se dice, pero. And then you can start to learn the word, and then you'll get the answer. You go, arreglar. And you won't forget because you go, I didn't know how to say that. I need to write that down. And even if you don't do it in the conversation, when the conversation is over, going back to step number 1, you want to take note of that situation so you can go look it up later. All right. You can also use the phrase es como. So in English, that means it's like. So for example, let's say that you can't remember something very simple like the color green, which this will happen to you, right? You swear you know this vocabulary, but you just haven't used it in a while and you don't know. Like this literally just happened to me a few weeks ago. I was listening to a football game in Spanish, which was kind of new. It was fútbol americano, not soccer. And they were talking about the color of the team's jerseys. And they said, azul marino. And I said, navy blue, azul marino. I haven't heard that in ages. But I remembered when I heard it, and I kind of repeated it a few times. Azul marino, navy blue. I remember now. But who says navy blue every day? Okay. So this is going to happen to you. So you can start to explain it. So let's say I was trying to remember, I don't remember how to say navy blue. So I'm trying to explain the jerseys and I go, es como azul. So it's like blue, pero más oscuro. So, but it's darker, right? So again, I don't remember how to say navy blue, but I can explain it. I can describe it using other words that I do know in Spanish, and that will keep the conversation going. And it will give you a chance to explain yourself in other ways. And you will not have to switch to English if you get really good at this. So I want you to get comfortable with using these phrases so that you stay in the flow of the conversation. Now, number 6 is that you can plan your conversation topics in advance. So let's say you're meeting up with someone to practice Spanish. You can plan ahead by picking a specific topic or interest that you're going to discuss. So for example, if you know that you're going to be talking about food, you can take the time before the conversation to brush up on any related words and vocabulary beforehand, like comida, food, ingredientes, ingredients, receta, recipe. So again, you can start to review some of these words, and this will reduce the number of unknown words that you'll encounter, and it will help you feel more prepared. You can also listen to content or watch content about the topic. So if you know you're going to be talking about your favorite Puerto Rican foods, go on YouTube and find a video about Puerto Rican foods. Look for a podcast about Puerto Rican cuisine and listen to them talk about it in Spanish. And even if you don't know all the words, it will be a way for you to learn some more vocabulary. So I definitely recommend planning in advance so that you can study vocabulary related to the topic ahead of time. And step number 7, the last thing, and this is probably the most important, is to keep practicing. You don't want to give up, but you want to increase your consistency so that you can really begin to master these skills. So every conversation that you have is another step forward. And remember, you are not going to know every single word in Spanish. You don't know every single word in English. I know I don't. But with time and consistent effort, you will find that you know enough to keep the conversation flowing. And that is what really matters. All right, so I hope that you have found these tips helpful. I'm going to review them one more time just so, again, it'll help it stick to your memory. The first thing is to actively take notes. So write down words that you don't know during or after conversations. 2, create digital flashcards. Include examples and review them regularly. 3, ask for clarification. So you can use words and phrases like "¿Qué significa eso?" so that you can learn while you're in the middle of a conversation and really begin to increase your vocabulary. 4, practice new words right away. Incorporate any new vocabulary into multiple sentences and examples in context and use them in your next conversation. 5, you want to stay in the flow. Use filler phrases like déjame pensar and learn how to describe things using other words so that you keep the conversation going. 6 is plan your conversation topics in advance. You can prepare for your discussions by learning topic-specific words ahead of your conversation. And number 7, keep practicing, be consistent, embrace the fact that this is going to be a journey and enjoy the learning process, and you will find that your Spanish gets better and better with each conversation. So, John, I hope this helps you and everyone else listening who might have struggled with this. This should really be a great strategy to help you navigate those moments in Spanish conversations when you just get stuck. It does take practice, but remember, the more you practice, the better you will get. So thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I did want to let you know before I get out of here that if you want more opportunities to practice speaking Spanish, join us for our Spanish Conversation Challenge. Go to SpanishConversationChallenge.com for all the details. It is completely free. This is really our open house, so you can get a sneak peek in what it feels like to be a member of the Spanish Fluency Club, where we do have regular conversation practice. And we will be opening the doors to the Fluency Club again pretty soon. But right now, we are hosting this free challenge. We're going to kick it off January 6th. And you will have an opportunity to practice speaking Spanish every single day. You'll work with our amazing team of language coaches who are all native Spanish speakers, who are certified teachers, and are more than willing and happy to help you learn Spanish. Very friendly, not intimidating at all. So if you are nervous that you've never spoken to a native speaker before, this is your opportunity to do it. It is a very welcoming and friendly environment. You can ask anyone in our community, and this is your opportunity to get a taste of how it feels to be a member of our Fluency Club. So if you want to sign up, SpanishConversationChallenge.com. And again, it's absolutely free. And you want to make sure you hold your spot because we do have limited spaces available in our live sessions. Like I said, we will be having daily Spanish conversation practice, but you've got to sign up at SpanishConversationChallenge.com to hold your spot. As always, I hope something you heard today will take you one step closer from Spanish beginner to bilingual. Hasta la próxima.